This
a
conference
Q&R.
will now be recorded.
It'll be a Q&R, question and response, just because I'm pretty sure I don't have any answers. So, but I'll happily talk about anything.
Right. Thanks for that note. Okay, so Taylor Worsham, Gunnison County Libraries. We're at the Crested Butte Library right now and excited to host this event. It's actually our featured Poetry Month event here with Rosemerry. And tonight she is going to give a reading for about 45 minutes and then the Q&R, which she mentioned, for about 15. And then if you're interested tomorrow, please come to her thought shop where she will share poems from a variety of authors about brokenness, self-compassion, generosity, and kindness. She will offer a host of writing prompts to help you write your own poems that explore how you might choose to love the broken world. And you can sign up for that on her website, rosemerry.com. And then now I'm going to give a brief biography of her, and then we will get rolling. So Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer served as the third Colorado Western Slope Poet Laureate from 2015 to 2017, and she co-hosts a podcast on creative process called Emerging Form. She is the co-founder of Secret Agents of Change, a surreptitious kindness cabal. Her poetry has appeared in O Magazine, A Prairie Home Companion, PBS NewsHour, Ted Koozer's American Life in Poetry, and on River Rocks. She has 13 poetry collections, most recently Hush, winner of the Helicon Prize for Poems of Human Ecology. We do have many of her poetry books available here at the Crested Butte Library, just throwing that in there. But she's been a storyteller at the National Storytelling Festival and Taos Storytelling Festival. Since 2006, she's written a poem a day, and her one-word mantra is okay. So welcome, Rosemerry. And yeah, let's get started. You can also drop things in the chat and we'll try to address that as we can, or it will be addressed by the conclusion of the session. Cheers.
Great. Thank you, Taylor. And thanks to Gunnison County Library, Crested Butte Library in particular. I'm delighted we can all be here because on GoTo, so that we can be together. Although I have to admit, I'm just slightly bummed to not be in Crested Butte because it's one of my favorite places to be. I love being in Crested Butte, Colorado. Well, we thought we'd do, in honor of Poetry Month and Earth Day coming right up, a selection of poems about the Earth and about what it is to be an inhabitant of this planet. And I wanted to start with a couple of poems that have really moved me by poets who are some of my heroes about how do we meet the natural world. And I wanted to start with this one by A.R. Ammons. This is called Eyesight. It was May before my attention turned to spring, and my word, I said to the mountains, I missed it. Spring came and went before I got right to see. Don't worry, said the mountain. Try the later northern slopes, or if you can climb into spring. But, said the mountain, it is not that way with all things. Some that go are gone. I remember the first time I read that poem being kind of floored and delighted by the fact that A.R. Ammons was actually having a conversation with the mountain. And it became a favorite pastime of mine then to have conversations with the world all around me. And in fact, to this day, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to go out into the world and ask it, what do you have to teach me? In fact, I think it's probably one of the predominant ways that I start writing a poem is I look at the cottonwood tree and I say, what do you have to teach me? And I look at the cactus and I say, what do you have to teach me? And we'll hear some of those poems tonight. But I I love that invitation to be a student of the world and to be in conversation with the world, to actually listen. And I don't know whether or not A.R. Ammons actually heard the mountain talk back. I'm guessing he didn't. I'm guessing it was intuited. But I'm just saying that I don't actually hear the things talk back. I just intuit what they might say. This quote comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, and he says, "The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now." Wow. I mean, that I hope I hope that that's what would infuse any poem that's meeting the natural world, is that willingness to meet the miracle of it. And I suppose that's what drives this poem by Anna Akhmatova. She was a Russian poet who was born just before the turn of the 1900s, and she chose to stay in Russia when everything was shutting down. Right there in World War One, all of the other poets and musicians were leaving the country. Everyone begged her to leave, and she said, "No, my country needs me now more than ever." She stayed, and in fact was greatly persecuted, was shut down as and was um, persecuted by Stalin. Her son was sent away. Her husband was killed. Um, I guess part of the reason I wanted to share this poem is because it has so many similarities to some things that are happening today in that very part of the world. And she acknowledges how difficult life can be, and also finds that miracle that Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about. This is "Everything is plundered, betrayed, sold" by Anna Akhmatova. Everything is plundered, betrayed, sold. Death's great black wing scrapes the air. Misery gnaws to the bone. Why then do we not despair? By day, from the surrounding woods, cherries blow summer into town. At night, the deep transparent skies glitter with new galaxies. And the miraculous comes so close to the ruined, dirty houses. Something not known to anyone at all, but wild in the breast for centuries. I love that poem in particular too, because I feel as if Anna Akhmatova is not in any way trying to pretend that everything's beautiful and everything's fine. She really does embrace that paradox of the world is really difficult, and yet the miraculous is so close. And the way she says this, something not known to anyone at all, but wild in our breast for centuries. And maybe that to me is the biggest invitation of writing a poem about the earth, is to allow ourselves to stay in that place of not knowing and really experiencing, to really feel what it is to be that close to the miracle of being alive. So those are some of my poetry heroes in nature writing, and I'll jump in now to some of my own poems, and here we go. If you do have thoughts or questions, go ahead and write them in the chat bar. I'm happy to try and talk about them in real time if possible. And so this is a poem about the urge to name things, which I don't know about you, but when I go out into the natural world, I love knowing the names of all the flowers, the names of all the mushrooms, the names of the trees, the names of the rocks. And oh, someone says, please share poets and poems you read. So the poems that I just read, the first one was Eyesight by A.R. Ammons. And then the Everything is Plundered, Betrayed, Sold by Anna Akhmatova. And this is called Where We Are Headed. It's in Hush, which is my most recent book. And it's a poem that kind of acknowledges that longing to name. Confucius, I think, said that all wisdom comes from learning to call a thing by its right name. And I suppose this is me arguing with Confucius. Where we are headed, at first, we just say flower. How thrilling it is to name. Then it's aster, begonia, chrysanthemum. We spend our childhood practicing how to separate one thing from another. Daffodil, edelweiss, fern. We learn which have 5 petals, which have 6. We say, this is gladiolus, this hyacinth. And we fracture the world into separate identities. Iris, jasmine, lavender. Divorcing life into singular bits. And then, when we know how to tell one thing from another, perhaps at last we feel the tug to see not what makes things different, but what makes things the same. Perhaps we feel the pleasure that comes when we start to blur the names. And once again, everything is flower. And by everything, I mean everything. Um, I don't want to say Confucius is wrong. I just want to say that everything that's true, it seems like the opposite's also true. This is, oh, well, this poem was inspired by another of my favorite poets, William Stafford. He has a fabulous poem called Yes, in which he acknowledges that all the worst things in the world could happen, sort of like that poem that I shared by Anna Akhmatova. Um, So what are you going to do with that information? What are you going to do with this knowledge, as he says, that it could happen anytime? Earthquake, Armageddon, tornado, it could happen. This poem is called Yes. It's Saturday, and I'm choosing to sit on a broken fence. The logs all weathered and fallen. I'm choosing to sit in the sun on a broken fence beside a dirt parking lot in the high desert. Perhaps I do not really believe that this is the only moment that matters. Perhaps I don't trust that I could be gone, that all life could be gone in one blink and one bomb and one meteorite? Or is it that I choose to sit on a broken fence beside a dirt parking lot with the scent of pine edging each breath and the sound of cottonwood leaves rustling and then stilling, because this too matters. This willingness to treat each breath as if it were the first, and to treat each place as if it were the last, and give it my full attention. To be like the birds sitting on the barbed wire, knowing now, now is the moment to sing. I think another thing that I love about writing poems about the world, about the earth, about the natural world, is just kind of really leaning into the deep miracle of it. And this this is about the black swifts that astonish me with what they're able to do. This is called How It Might Happen. And man, I think of them as some of the best teachers there are. How It Might Happen. The baby black swift is born behind a waterfall. It never leaves its nest until one autumn day it leaves the damp familiar and starts to fly. Though it has never flown before, it will not land until it reaches Brazil, thousands of miles away. There is perhaps a wing inside forgiveness. Just because it has never flown before, just because it has never seen beyond the watery veil, does not mean that it won't instantly learn what it can do. Like the baby black swift, it has no idea what it's flying toward. It only knows that it must fly and not stop until it is time to stop. It sounds so miraculous, audaciously impossible. It is not a matter of courage. It is simply what rises up to be done, the urge to follow some inaudible call that says now, now. That was How It Might Happen. And that also is a poem here in Hush. The last poem I read right before that was called Yes. And it was called, yes, it was called Yes. It was named after William Stafford's poem, also called Yes. So those were all from Hush. This is one from Naked for Tea, and looks like that. And this is called Years Later, I Remember What He Taught Us. The guide stabbed the small round of cactus with his knife, then held it up in front of him. With his other hand, he flicked on his lighter and burned off the spines. I do not remember the smell of it, or how much it smoked. What I remember is how he was left with a smooth and harmless lump of green in his palm. He sliced it open and taught us to drink. It could save you, he said, if you find yourself lost in the desert. Do this. Burn off your spines. Whatever bristles you have grown to protect yourself, set them aflame. Open however you can. Let me pull you to my lips. I will do the same for you. We are all lost in the desert. Any questions, any thoughts so far? Anything anyone's got burning up, a question or anything you could write in the chat bar? All right. Well, we'll have chances for those questions, burning questions later on. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I find myself um, wildly able to ignore what's happening in the natural world by being very invested in whatever's happening in my very small life. And it's one of the reasons, really, that I started writing a poem every day was because that forced me to pay attention. And because I really could go for a drive and see nothing. I could go for a drive and see only the thoughts in my head and miss it all. And I think one of the biggest gifts of writing daily is that it becomes a practice of noticing, a practice of wanting to notice, a practice of trying to bring it all in. So this is, I suppose I'm kind of making fun of myself in this poem. This is Finding My Calling, and this isn't in a book, but you can find every poem that I'm reading on my blog, which is called 100 Falling Veils. That's all spelled out, 100 Falling Veils. And every poem that I'm reading will be on there somewhere. This one again is called Finding My Calling. And it has a line in it from Jack Granath's poem After the Japanese. His line that you'll hear later in here is, "You do the right thing, citizen." That's what he said. Finding my calling. A warm March day, and the blue sky slips itself into the list of things to do, and I would have to be deaf or just plain stubborn to not hear the call to play outside, and damn, but I'm stubborn. So the world sends a bobcat, a red-tailed hawk, and a whole herd of elk to the yard. What's a busy woman to do but surrender? I don't. Head down, I get the work done. I put the blinders on of responsibility until a poem says to me, "You do the right thing, citizen." And my chest pounds in urgent code. That means you. And I put down the work and walk into the day to do my duty, which is to meet the world that will never send an email, the world that will never knock, will never call, but will always say, "Welcome, citizen, welcome." I hope you're not quite as stubborn as I am. I hope you just get yourself out there no matter what. But sometimes Sometimes. Let's see, there's a couple of comments here. Let's see what, not a question, but an appreciation of imagery. Why, thank you, Kristen. And specificity. Thank you very much. And thanks for typing in 100 Falling Veils. That's the name of the blog. All right. Here's last year's Earth Day poem. It's called On Earth Day. And it started inspired by a tree, and then you'll see where it went from there. Of course, the trees with their greening, their growing, their gift of eating light. How beautiful they are in these first days of spring, their feathery droops that gather low sun, the tender gold when the leaves first unfurl. But today, I am awed by the vital soil that feeds them, awed by the multipeds and woodlice, fly larvae, springtails that fragment the once living world into mulch, awed by the nematodes, the mites, the pauropods, awed by the rotifers, the algae, the bacteria, the single-celled protozoans, all these makers of Earth. There is elegance in the process, the breaking down, the separation of proteins, the release of nitrogen, creation of rich, dark humus. How seldom I honor the beauty of tearing apart, the blessing of brokenness, the importance of those who undo, who help the world go to pieces. The earth itself is an altar to breakdown, decay, collapse, demise. And from these infinite violences, we rise like trees. We rise. Yeah, what a thing to think about the earth as an altar to brokenness. Um, I think a lot about brokenness actually, and how I think there was a time I thought it was bad. Like I really had a judgment about that. And one of the bigger gifts of my life has been learning to embrace openness as a. I'm getting a notice that I'm supposed to share my screen. I'm not sure what that was. There's a child's book called The Other Way to Listen by Bird Baylor that speaks to deep listening to nature with beautiful simplicity. Thanks, Fran, for that suggestion. Karen Bellerose says, so fantastic on every level. Question, you mentioned how easy it can be to miss the moments in the natural world. Do some of the poems happen for you in reflection or more in the moment? What a great question. Both. Yeah, I think that often I'll be, going about my day and think, oh, look at that, a poem. It's a poem right there in front of me. Uh, and often that won't happen. And I get to the end of the day and I'm going to write my poem. I always write my poems at night. And I get to the end of the day and I sit down with that blank paper and I think, huh, what? What was there today? I used to be terrified of blank and not so much anymore. I really actually love blank these days. And I love that then when I sit with the blank, there is that potential for reflection. What did I hear? What did I smell? What did I see? And letting it um, show up later, which is all the more reason to pay attention all day long. Thanks for that great question. Well, I suppose this is about the actual Earth, like the full-on planet Earth, this poem is. It's called Coming Together. It seems too slow, this moving toward each other, toward peace. The heart is eager for union, longs for grounding between continents, longs for connection, for wholeness, instead of all this fracture. Do the tectonic plates remember what it was to be Pangaea? Can the heart remember a time before it was defined by rifting and brokenness? I have read that the next supercontinent will form in 200 million years and that we are halfway through the scattered phase. Oh, we are so scattered. They say the pace of the plates is comparable to the speed at which our fingernails grow. Oh, so slow, this coming together. Yet, it happens. It happens. Let the heart know what the earth knows. It happens. Well, there you go. First a poem that praised the brokenness, and then a poem that praises the coming together. I guess I believe in that more than anything is the paradox of all of it. So maybe one of the bigger lessons that I think the earth has been giving me day after day after day, maybe one of the least favorite lessons I had, although the more I can embrace it, the bigger the gift is just to say yes to the world as it is, to let the world itself really um, help me see. You know, when we used to have an orchard, my husband and I had an orchard for many years, and that was one of the biggest lessons for me when we had 80 acres and it was July and all of the cherries were ripe on the trees and it was time to pick them. And then there would be a hailstorm for 1 minute. And in 1 minute, all of that fruit was ruined. And what could you do? You could go out and you could shout to the sky, no, but it did nothing to say no. There was nothing to do but say yes, to say yes to the world as it was. And boy, the earth really gives us that lesson again and again, doesn't it? With mudslides, with avalanches, with tsunamis and wildfires. And this poem is called When I Thought I Wanted Things to Be Different. Sometimes, she said, being uncomfortable is what we need to do. And I think of the scald of hot water, how it cleans the stain, how being covered in abrasive fuzz is the only way to harvest the peach, how the seed is carried by the burr. It is human to seek pleasure, shun pain, but think of the tree, how it lets the gale rip away what is dead, and the grape, how it bubbles and foams before it becomes wine. And the cactus, how it needs the drought as much as it needs the rain.
So good, Rosemary. That is just perfect. What a great poem. Thank you so much for being so wise with what you write. I, I cannot figure out how to do the chat with this new go-to meeting. I don't
Sweet
know.
friend, thank you, Uliast, for your comment. And I see the chat bar is on the very top of my screen, on the top right, and it's a little square with a, you know, it looks like a chat bar on the very top right. So maybe
I
you'll
found
see.
it. I found it. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, good. Maybe now that everybody else knows where it is too, you'll jump in and write more in the chat bar. If
Good.
you want, if you don't want to, that's fine too. Thanks, Uliast. So this poem, I guess, is on those same lines of just really allowing things to be what they are. One of the best bits of writing advice I ever got from a writing professor was actually from a fiction writing professor, was get the weather right. And it was true for stories, and I think it's very true for poems too. And this is a poem certainly all about the weather, but it's not like all of these poems, right? It's not just about what's happening outside. I always think of the poem as the bridge that builds it. The poem is the bridge between what's happening in the outer world, the outer landscape, what's happening on the earth, what do we access with our senses, and what's happening in this inner landscape, what are our feelings, our ideas, our thoughts, our fears. And the poem loves to bring these two worlds together. Excuse me. And so I guess that's what this poem is doing. It's getting the weather right for both the outer and the inner world. It's called Acceptance. Today, grief is a long, steady rain, and the thing to do is to walk in the long, steady rain. The thing is to let the face get wet, let the clothes get wet, let the hair get wet and plastered against the cheeks, the neck. The thing is to meet the soaking world and the soaking skin and the soaking shoes and the soaking dreams and not pretend it's dry. Whatever longing there is for dryness, it is soaking too. Because it is raining, the thing to do is to walk in the long and steady rain, to walk in the sodden and soaking world, to trust that it will not rain forever, to breathe in the scent of the wet, wet earth, to be wet in the wet, wet world. Thanks. Well, of course, an Earth Day reading would have to talk about the garden. I always plant the garden on Mother's Day, which is even a little bit early for where I live. Just I wouldn't dare plant a flower on Mother's Day, but I put all the peas and beans and lettuce and beets and carrots into the ground, then potatoes. This is a poem about those early garden days. This is walking in the garden. Every morning I walk into the garden, even when there is little to see, only rows of tiny sprouts and the earth just beginning to crack. It's not so much that I speak to the seedlings, though I do, to the slender green lashes of carrots and the heart-shaped leaves of beans. It is more that they speak to me in syllables I feel through my fingers. They speak of resilience and tenderness. They speak of the dark and beautiful earth. There are so many days when I worry that I am not doing enough. Worry that I could be more kind, more generous, more loving, more vocal, more good. But in the garden, pulling bindweed and clover and salsify from the mostly empty rows, all of my brokenness feels less broken. It is somehow easier to forgive myself for being who I am and to mean it. Easier to know myself as one of many, easier to believe that, like the potato greens, I have so much more to offer that can't yet be seen, but it's growing, surely, deep in the darkness. It's growing. That rain poem was called Acceptance, and this one was called Walking in the Garden. Again, all of these poems that I'm reading, they're not in books yet, but you could find them all on my blog, which is 100fallingveils.com. And by the way, if you didn't know that I send the poems out every day, which is, of course, a crazy thing to do, to send your first draft into the world every day, but that's what I do. And you can get them every day in your inbox if you would like to. And if you're not getting them yet, the place to sign up for that is just right there at 100fallingveils.com. And you can go to the upper right-hand corner and sign up and have those poems sent to your inbox every morning. Let's see, Fran says, I am a spiritual care practitioner and have quoted many of your beautiful poems on grief to help the people I work with in their grief. There is such beauty in your words and in your heart. Thank you, Fran. Thank you for sharing the poems. And by the way, thank you for being a spiritual care practitioner who's working with people who are meeting grief. I'm grateful for you doing that very important work. Thank you. And Tom says, I am a spiritual caregiver as well and use Rosemary's poems also. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you to any of you who are doing that beautiful work in the world. And thank you for sharing the poems. That's what they're for. Well, I have this poem about the dust. I suppose maybe when we think about Earth on Earth Day, we have a more romantic idea about Earth, but let's face it, The earth in our house is just as earth as the earth outside our house. So this is The Dust Speaks. I always come back, not out of spite, not to annoy you. I settle here in your home because I am you. I am your sloughed off skin. I am your hair. I am your cells. I'm fibers from your clothes mixed with bits of dead bugs and soil and pollen and plastic. I am the memory of everywhere you've been, and I am the memory of what you do, and I come from places you will never go. I can shine too. Sometimes, when the light is right, you see me glitter in the room and you curse me. But, child of the cosmos, I am here to help you remember where you came from. And, child of Earth, I am here to help you see you are one with everything. Everything. I am here to remind you where you go from here. That was The Dust Speaks. I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of creepy and absolutely cool that the dust is basically made out of us. Isn't that awesome? Kristen says, thank you for permission to see the dust is magic. And now I don't feel so badly about not dusting. There's something, by the way, about dust poems. I think I have like 6 dust poems. And let's see, Pilar writes, only you and Pablo Neruda could make dust so fabulous an image and topic of a poem. Thank you. Actually, Danusha Lamaris has a great dust poem, and Dorian Locks has a great dust poem. You should write a dust poem too, friends. Write dust poems. See what shows up. Okay, I have 2 more that I'll share, and then we're just going to open it up to having a big conversation about whatever, about poetry, about Earth Day, about a writing practice. Oh, let's see. Judy says, laughing at this in large part because one of my favorite people lives in Lyman, where there is dust and more dust. Yeah, nothing stops the wind and nothing stops the dust. In fact, I live right now, I live pretty remotely. But for the first time in my adult life, I live on a paved driveway. I've always lived on dirt driveways. And when my husband, about 20 years ago, wanted to pave our driveway, I was kind of angry about it. I was like, what? Why would we do that? And I want you to know that it it really made it much easier to not have to dust all the time, which I didn't really dust all the time. I just felt like I should dust all the time. Yeah. Okay, so this poem is called On a Clear Day, and I think, oh, I just thought of another poem I'd really like to read. All right, you're in for 3 poems. I gotta find it though. I found it. So I don't know if any of you also do yoga, but there was a there was a time when I hated Shavasana. I just couldn't stand that we had to lie there because I had so much to do. And it pissed me off that we were just going to lie there. Then I was pregnant. I had just had a baby and we were in Mexico and I'd gone to a yoga class on the beach and it was my 1 hour to myself. And there I was ready to really work hard in this 1 hour I had to be alone in my body. And the yoga teacher we did about 2 yoga poses and then we did Shavasana for half an hour. And the whole time we were in Shavasana, and for those of you who don't know, Shavasana is just lying on the ground with like you're dead. It means corpse pose. So you're lying on the ground with your eyes closed, not moving. And I was lying there on the ground, not moving, just furious. I kept thinking, why are we not moving? Why are we still in Shavasana? so angry. We stopped. We got up. We did like 3 more poses, and then we did Shavasana for another half hour, and that was the end of class. And I was out of my mind. That was how I learned how desperately I needed Shavasana to to learn what Shavasana had to teach me. Shavasana. Once again, the field rehearses how to die. Some of the grass turns golden first. Some simply fades into brown. Just this morning, I too lay in corpse pose, practicing how to let myself be totally held by the earth without striving. How to meet the day without rushing off to do the next necessary or beautiful thing. Soon the grass will bend or break, molder or disintegrate. Every year, the same lesson in how to join the darkness, how to be unmade, how quietly we might lean into an uncertainty. How generous the ground. That was Shavasana, and that's in Hush. Um, Yeah, Shavasana is probably my favorite pose now. But it took me railing against it first. But there it is. That is something on Earth Day. Just why not do this on Earth Day or any day to lie down on the earth itself? There's a whole movement about it now called ground earthing, and you just put your bare feet on the ground, you put your whole body on the ground, and just let the earth hold you. Or as a math friend of mine liked to say, that gravity is like a giant hug, the earth reaching up to hold you. So as you lie there, you can think of being caressed, held, embraced by the earth. Okay, this is on a clear day. The way the field holds the shadow of the cottonwood, that is how life holds me. Holds me no matter my shape, holds me with no effort. Holds my darkness and knows it as weightless, as transient, as something that will shift. It never says no to me. I am still learning to trust life, to trust no matter how I show up, I will be held. Trust that my life is not a problem. Trust that as much as I am the shadow, I am also the field. Well, friend, I'm going to stop there, and I have one more poem that I'll read at the very, very, very end. Just a very short, short poem, but let's take a little opportunity to talk with each other. And if you have any thoughts or questions or observations or things you want to share about poetry or about the poems that we read today, I think you do need to unmute yourself, which you do at the very bottom of your screen. There's a square with a microphone picture on it that says mic, and you just press that and you'll be unmuted so you can speak.
This was very lovely. How often do you do this? Or is this the first and last time?
Thank you, Parisa. So this is the first and hopefully not the last time that I do it with the Gunnison County Library, but I do programs online with great frequency. I'm backing off a lot right now just because I have a large project that I'm working on that I'm going to finish before I do much more teaching. But I am going to be doing a monthly, what I like to call thought shop, which is a webinar style. So all you see, you don't see anyone but me. It's just me talking. It's not very interactive, but the first one is happening tomorrow, and it's called Still Falling in Love with the Broken World. And so I'll choose lots of poems by lots of poets, and I'll read all those poems, and I'll talk about them, and I'll give lots of writing prompts. Then everyone who's signed up for that also gets the recording. I think the recording is in some ways even more useful because you can put it on pause and you can just treat it like your own workshop right at home, and I'll talk about it and I'll give you the prompt and you can just pause it and do your own writing. And then when you're ready, you can launch into the next prompt. So That's tomorrow night at 6 o'clock Colorado time, Mountain Time. And like I say, if you aren't able to make it in person, that's okay. You can just sign up and they'll send you a link, but they'll send you the link whether you're there in person or not. So
Thank you very much. Sounds
yeah, you could. Thank you, Parisa. Nice to meet you. And oh, Kristen says I love the name Thought Shop instead of a workshop. You know, I hope I never lead a workshop. I like to lead play shops when I'm in person, but because I'm just throwing all these ideas at you, I call it a thought shop. Is that last piece on your blog, Sue-Ann, on a clear day? Yes, on a clear day should totally be on the blog, and it's a fairly recent one. I know that I wrote it this fall at some point. I do heart storming instead of brainstorming. See, same idea exactly. It's so interesting to just notice the words that we use, and I think they matter. Anyone else? Any thoughts or questions?
Hey, Rosemary, it's Rob.
Hey, Rob.
First, thanks for doing this, and how you can do it without actual intimate response from a group virtually is, I don't know, but thank you for doing it. You know, I also spent 40 years in conservation and ecology, but what your poetry does, as you have articulated before, is it helps me pay attention and slow down to take what's being given. And in these days, is that an important thing to be reminded of? And that's what the words do. And so I think I can speak for this whole group, of whom I've not met a soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I think you have.
I get that, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for that. And thank you for your work in conservation, by the way. It's such important work. I'm grateful for everyone who's working on behalf of the earth and its beings. Oh, hi, Janice Fielka. She says, I recently read something like, a prayer is a deep sigh. With that in mind, I say this sacred evening together has been full of prayers and full of deep sighs. Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Thank you. Nice to see your name, friend.
Rosemary.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi. Echoing what Rob and Janice are saying, and something I'm really appreciating about this evening too is the reminder, as Rob was saying, of paying attention, and at the same time, so much about acceptance of what is, and then seeing that beauty, like not only looking at the dust, but when you were talking about soil and dirt and everything that comes together to create that. And so that level of layers of appreciation. So the noticing, I think what you're reminding us of is noticing in such a wider lens way of what else do we see when we're in that space of appreciation and acceptance at the same time, and attention, like all those A's at the same time. I don't know. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I love the way you said that. Appreciation and acceptance. And I think the other thing, I'm glad you brought this up because it makes me think too that one of my favorite things about a poetry practice is that it constantly forces me to go do research. And so, like for that, when I was writing that poem about, not just the tree, but the soil, and then I got all excited. I'm like, yeah, like what are all those things in the soil? I have to say that I haven't had super positive thoughts about nematodes in the past. It's not, I don't think nematodes, yay. But I had that feeling when I did the research. And I think that that is one of the beautiful invitations about writing poems, is the invitation to go through the layers. Stanley Kunitz says, to live in the layers, not in the litter. Just to see what else is there? What else is there? And to continually be curious about that. And I feel like poetry is this invitation to be consistently curious. And
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. I have a question for Jack Riddle, who's here. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
Oh boy, I was just about to bother you.
Oh,
Don't
well,
bother each other.
Jack, I mean, you have so many beautiful nature poems. What do you have? What are some of your thoughts, like in terms of going out into the natural world? Because you are a gorgeous. One of my favorite things about your poems is your how you observe and the way that you bring what's happening outside in a very you elevate the quotidian, I guess, when and it's what are some of your thoughts about it?
Well, my my first thought is uh, that there's a mistake about what's profound, and that tends to be from here up instead of from here out.
Yeah.
And you're such a beautiful uh, artist. It leads us uh, out of our minds and into, and what I call actually not the natural world, but the non-human world. Um, I I'm trying more and more not to say the natural world. I'm not critiquing you, Rosemary. I'm just simply saying that I prefer that all of us are part of that natural world, and we've
Mm.
elevated ourselves for way too long a time. So your nematodes are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. I've made way more mistakes than they've ever made, and I think it's I'd say it's very important. And one of the fun examples, and I'll shut up, is a student coming into me and saying, the usual thing, I don't know, I don't have anything to write about. And then I fall off my chair and pass out and can't believe I heard that again. And then get up and I say, well, how about your grandmother? And the student actually said, oh, everybody does that. And I said, oh my God, who's your grandmother? I've never heard of your grandmother. Oh, who is it? And and she went, oh, and that's just so important in our culture because Emily Dickinson helped us. Yeah, I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? And I always want to say, yeah, I'm tired of the somebodies. I want to be nobody too, and then get rid of me and look at that nematode. That's what you did for us tonight. You got rid of all of us. And it was just a beautiful extinguishing moment for all of us to disappear into what really matters. We don't matter. Come on. Let's
Oh,
disappear into what really matters. So bless your heart as always up on that mountain. Do you know it snowed here yesterday? That's
oh my
ridiculous.
gosh,
It
Michigan, what's
doesn't
happening?
snow in Michigan. It's April in Michigan. April in Michigan. Ugh. I
Well,
can't
that
even plant a bean.
you gave me the perfect entrance, Jack, to the last poem, which is really about that disappearing act. And maybe that's my favorite. That is, I suppose, the best thing, the best. Why do I have to qualify it? But and I love your comment too, Jack, about the not human, or sometimes I've liked to call it too the more than human world, including us in that natural world, and then the more than human world. But I guess this is the last poem I'll do tonight. And before I do, I just want to again thank you, Taylor, and the Gunnison County Public Libraries, specifically the Crested Butte Public Library. I want to thank every one of you for coming, and I hope to see you again tomorrow night. If you're open to spending 2 nights together playing poetry, tomorrow will be a whole different kind of deal. But we'll close with this one, and it comes from this book called Intimate Landscape, which I did with the phenomenal photographer Claude Steelman. All these beautiful color photographs in this book, and it's just it's a beautiful book. But here's a poem about that disappearing act that Jack was just talking about, and the poem is called "To Fall Deeper in Love with the World." Sit with lichen longer than comfort allows. The urge to move must rise and pass, rise and pass, rise and pass. Frustration breeds. Sit. Sun. Rain. Snow. Until little by little the wanting is gone, and all that remains is sitting with lichen. Thank you, friends. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing an evening together of poetry, thinking about this beautiful planet we inhabit and the miracles of it. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, the miracle is that we get to walk this green earth. That's the miracle, and be present right now. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.